Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. So starts one declaration. I declare bankruptcy is another. Michael Scott, The Office, anybody? Okay, today we're going to look at a biblical declaration that told us about another name for God and what that name means for us. Hey, it's Jen, and we're back with the Bible for Busy People talking about the names of God, what they tell us about his character. So today we're back in Genesis in chapter 32, and we're focusing on Jacob. Now, Jacob and Esau were sons of Isaac, who was the son of Abraham. And in their younger days, Jacob, whose name means the deceiver, stole his brother Esau's birthright as the firstborn by pretending to be him. And Isaac was very old and wasn't seeing too well, so he was deceived and gave the blessing to Jacob. Esau was understandably not very happy about that. So Jacob fled his home and went to stay with family in another region. He was married and built a whole household with many children, and that's a whole story unto itself. When he was there, he learned what it was like to be deceived by family members. So picking up in Genesis 32, he is getting ready to go home to face his brother Esau for the first time in years, and he still doesn't know if Esau is angry enough to kill him. Genesis 32, verses 22 through 32 say, During the night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 slave women, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream along with all his possessions. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not defeat him, he struck Jacob's hip socket as they wrestled and dislocated his hip. Then he said to Jacob, Let me go, for it is daybreak. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. What is your name? The man asked. Jacob, he replied. Your name will no longer be Jacob, he said. It will be Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him, Please tell me your name. But he answered, Why do you ask my name? And he blessed him there. Jacob then named the place Peniel. For I have seen God face to face, he said, yet my life has been spared. The sun shone on him as he passed by Penuel, limping because of his hip. That is why, still today, the Israelites don't eat the thigh muscle that is at the hip socket, because he struck Jacob's hip socket at the thigh muscle. Jacob the deceiver becomes Israel, he who struggles with God. I love this verse because God honors Jacob for struggling with him. I think he sees us in our distress and our questioning, our doubts and our concerns, and he invites us to ask our questions and to wrestle with the scriptures that we don't understand. It draws us nearer to him. God wants us to be curious. He wants us to come to him with our questions because it brings us nearer to him. It deepens our relationship. So Jacob is processing all of this, including the fact that he could have been killed by facing and wrestling with God, but he wasn't. Now we're going to go on to Genesis 33. It says, Now Jacob looked up and saw Esau coming toward him with 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the 2 slave women. He put the slaves and their children first, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. He himself went on ahead and bowed to the ground 7 times until he approached his brother. But Esau ran to meet him, hugged him, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. Then they wept. When Esau looked up and saw the women and children, he asked, Who are these with you? He answered, The children God has graciously given your servant. Then the slaves and their children approached him and bowed down. Leah and her children also approached and bowed down. And then Joseph and Rachel approached and bowed down. So Esau said, What do you mean by this whole procession I met? To find favor with you, my lord, he answered. I have enough, my brother, Esau replied. Keep what you have. But Jacob said, No, please, if I have found favor with you, take this gift from me. For indeed, I have seen your face, and it is like seeing God's face, since you have accepted me. Please take my present that was brought to you, because God has been gracious to me, and I have everything I need." So Jacob urged him until he accepted. Then Esau said, "Let's move on, and I'll go ahead of you." Jacob replied, "My Lord knows that the children are weak, and I have nursing flocks and herds. If they are driven hard for one day, the whole herd will die. Let my Lord go ahead of his servant. I will continue on slowly at a place suited to the livestock and the children until I come to my Lord at Seir." Esau said, "Let me leave some of my people with you." But he replied, "Why do that? Please indulge me, my Lord." That day Esau started on his way back to Seir, but Jacob went to Succoth. He built a house for himself and shelters for his livestock. That is why the place was called Succoth. After Jacob came from Paddan Aram, he arrived safely at Shechem in the land of Canaan and camped in front of the city. He purchased a section of the field where he had pitched his tent from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of silver. And he set up an altar there and called it God, the God of Israel. Esau's reaction is far from expected, and it reminds me of Luke 15 when the father in Jesus' parable goes running out to meet his wayward son. It's a grace Jacob didn't think he deserved. Jacob builds an altar and he calls it Elohe Israel, declaring the Lord as his God. I relate this to when we declare Jesus to be Lord of our lives, when we surrender our own wills over to whatever Jesus has for us to do because of the grace that Jesus offers us. Jacob recognized God's grace and deliverance and protection and provision in that moment when he met his brother and felt like he saw the face of God. And he went ahead and he claimed God as his God. He also declared his new name proudly. He was ready to take on this new identity as one who struggles with God, and his people would take on that identity as the Israelites. Today in prayer, what if you declared God to be your God? Elohe, fill in the blank with your name. Think back to a time when God surprised you with just incredible, unexpected grace. What did that look like for you? I think about the times when I confessed wrongdoing to friends and had to ask for apologies, and they responded with so much more grace than I expected them to give me. Maybe it's something like that for you. If you're struggling in this season, consider bringing that to God as well. Whatever you're struggling with, whatever your questions are, struggle with God because He invites you to. In the next couple days, we'll be finishing up our study on the names of God, and I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. See you tomorrow.
Thank you for listening to The Bible for Busy People. If you need prayer or want to go deeper in your faith, visit our show notes. Will you take a moment to share with a friend and leave a review? It helps the Bible get into even more people's minds and hearts. Find more podcasts that will recharge you at purposely.com.